I would like to welcome you to our virtual program here, and please, everyone, just let's give it up for Dr. Anna Hájková for getting up so early. And I just want to remind you that there is the Q&A function in the bottom of your screen there, so you can put any questions you might have. But Anna, I hand it over to you.
Good morning from England.
Well, Anna, I guess while we're waiting for someone to put a question in, please put a question in.
Yes, please, because I got up at 3:30.
Yes, as the Holocaust historian, as a queer Holocaust historian, you know, you've talked about how unusual it was, Margot's testimony. You know, is it really the only testimony? I mean, when I was reading that in the intro, so talk to us about that. It seems like there had to have been other prisoners with experiences, but talk to us about why you think that this hasn't been part of Holocaust history.
So, of course, Margot is not the only woman who participated in same-sex desire, having been deported as a Jewish woman or Jewish girl through the camp. She is not. And I touched on it very briefly in the introduction. Of course, I did it in brevity because, you know, once I start giving a long introduction, the introduction would be longer than the play. But she's the only one who bore testimony about it, speaking expressly about her positionality. It is a story that has been heavily stigmatized. You see how already in the camps, she overhears some of her fellow prisoners who say, this is not normal. And this is just kind of a relatively gentle expression of homophobia. I see among the listeners, Inge de Taille, one of the producers on the amazing Making Gay History podcast, and she will be able to confirm that the homophobia is much, much, much bigger. And there is a significant body of work coming out now. And when what you are is seen by the majority society as wrong, it's very difficult to go out there and say, this is part of my experience. So until I interviewed Margot, in all of her oral histories before, she alluded to the fact that Dita was more than just a friend, but one would not be able to read it without that knowledge. Okay. And I see after our requests, there is somebody called RK. Do you more about her life after 1957? 1957 seems to be a little bit an interesting date for Margot. I do not know why RK picked 1957, because maybe because it's early in the morning for me. I think in 1957, Margot became mother of one of her two children. But to answer in a little bit more roundabout way, Margot got married in early 50s. She first stayed home. She became mother of two children, lived in Brooklyn, eventually went to work again, first part-time and later full-time. I think she really liked her work. And she worked in an advertising agency, did quite a good career. Eventually, the marriage became not so good, and her husband would go and bet on horses. And after he became verbally abusive, she decided to divorce. At that point, both children were grown up or about to be grown up. So she started anew, and because of her kind of relatively good position, she was able to move out. She first stayed with Lou Burke, her girlfriend, before she got married to her husband. And then she was able to get a new apartment. I think she lived in Michigan for a bit, but was not very happy there. She also struggled with depression, possibly connected to the fact that she was a survivor. And she had at least another relationship with another woman, but while her children and grandchildren knew about it, she didn't tell it to them in so many words. And I think calling things by their name is so important. There is this great documentary by Magnus Gaten about a lesbian couple out of Ravensbrück. Neither of them was Jewish, by the way. And there is this amazing lesbian historian whose name I'm blanking out at because it's early in the morning, forgive me. But she says the importance of naming something, giving it a name and giving it legitimacy is incredibly important. So I hope with RK I answered a little bit. And then there is a question by Margot Heuman, Human. I wonder if he is a relative or if it's an accident. How did I come to know about Margot originally? Again, I mentioned it very briefly in the introduction. In fall 2017, Margot's distant niece, Linda Heuman, contacted me and told me I should talk to her aunt. I mean, Margot and Linda, where I believe that Margot was the cousin of Linda's father.
And Anna, if, you know, how do you feel that Margot's story fits into the larger picture of what was happening at Theresienstadt? Like, was that a unique environment there? Talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
Shelby, I love your question because it's very elegant and segues to November. Margot's story is very, very illustrative in a number of ways of what was happening in Theresienstadt. She and her sister, who was 3 years younger, were put into youth home because all the grown-ups had to work. The youth homes were separated according to gender, to age, and to language. So Lore and Margot went to German language homes, to two separate German language homes, while the parents were working. In the interview, Margot was able to remember quite exactly what her father did, namely he worked in the post office, but if I remember correctly, she no longer remembered what her mother did. So you could see that by the point I interviewed her, she was starting to forget some of the details of her imprisonment. But then, of course, I had the privilege of speaking with her about queer parts of her biography. And her father was extremely hungry and would be opening the parcels of the people that, he would be handing over the parcels, and he stole some of the food, which is why he was sentenced by the ghetto court and put on the transport in May 44. And his family chose to accompany him. And one of the really heartbreaking moments, but I felt it was important that I deal with in the book, are people's decisions like, do Holocaust victims have agency? Should we take their decision seriously? That is, of course, shall be, one of the seminal questions in Holocaust studies. You have had scholars such as Lawrence Langer who have questioned it. Then you have people like Alexandra Garbarini, Eliana Adler, and myself who said, we need to recognize the small differences and decision-making that Holocaust victims could make. And for the Heumans, it would be to either go with the father or stay behind without the father. So they decided to go with him. And I think this is very meaningful to decide to go as a family, while others maybe fall, if they're older, meet a new partner. And then you have Margot's decision in the family camp to go with Dita/Emma and to leave the family behind. But it's also something that definitely left an impact on her. Maybe I can share that. She recalls that as she was taking farewell from her father in July 44, her father was crying. And when she shared the story with me, she was crying. So the tears, the crying is very, very meaningful here. And I think tying to the previous question by Margot Heuman, it was really helpful for me when I met Margot that I was familiar with quite closely with the background to her persecution story, that I was finishing up a book manuscript about Theresienstadt, and that I was starting a book project about the 3 satellite camps in Neuengamme, Dessau-Ufer, Neugraben, and Tiefstark. I think there was a third question in the Q&A. Mayra Martinez, how has Margot's experience in Theresienstadt compared to some of the experiences of the prisoner society, musicians, and friendships? So Margot's love for opera is something that is instilled in her by Dita. and Erika's beautiful directing plays with this aria from Puccini's La Bohème, C'è la Malina, or in German translation, Wie kalt ist dieses Händchen? Oh, how cold is your hand? And you guys may appreciate that in a very nerdy moment, I got myself into the way of basically the English and the German translations of La Bohème, so that I don't use auto-translate, but actually use the official translation. And of course, the opera has a big queer history. It's an important moment for gay and lesbians to go to the opera and to embrace maybe the campness of it. Margot was a great lover of the opera in her post-war life in New York. She would go to the Met. When I visited her in Arizona, we went together to see a theater piece. And Margot pointed out that it's not quite up to her standards because, after all, she used to go to the Met. I thought it was a bit unfair to compare an Arizona production with the Metropolitan Opera, but this is Margot for you. She was a very honest person. And I showed, incidentally, this week the piece also in Cologne in Germany, and one of the German audience pointed out that, of course, we have a very well-known children's opera from Theresienstadt, Brunnibar, by Hans Krasse and others, and inquired if Margot had seen Brunnibar. And I think the fact that Margot did not see Brunnibar is salient here, because Theresienstadt was incredibly differentiated alongside the ethnic boundaries. Margot did not learn Czech. She learned, like most German language prisoners, just a few words. So she didn't see Brunnibar, just as teenagers of her age, if they were Czech-speaking, would have probably not gone to see La Bohème. So much on that question. And then there is a question by RK. Did Margot get involved in the feminist movement of the 1960s or in the gay rights? And no, she did not. I asked her all those questions, and this was not quite her world. She was very American, but she was a different part of gay story than, otherwise. I also asked her, obviously, lots and lots of questions about Greenwich Village in the late 40s and early 50s, where she has gone to the bars and met the people. And Margot did not remember. So as historians, rather than kind of hope to find more details because we would like to have a different story, we need to take what we have. But Margot, having said that, was a very progressive and liberal person. She had political opinions. She was very engaged in Arizona in the politics and was very outspoken about her political opinions. You may remember that it was, of course, during her lifetime, both in 2016, 2020, when two seminal presidential elections took place. And of course, we had many conversations, and she was an avid reader of the New York Times.
Wonderful. Well, if no one else has any more questions, I think, Anna, we will let you go back to sleep.
That is very kind of you.
Or not. I do see you have your coffee.
No, it's
and
change
for
the team.
everyone joining us, you will be able to meet Dr. Hájková in person on November 21st. Please join us at the Holocaust Museum, LA, for that. And I do want to let our audience know, for those of you who are in LA, our museum is closed because of the construction. We're in the middle of a really exciting, beautiful expansion. In less than 2 years' time, we will be double the size. So that is going on as we speak. We're closed for the summer, opening again in November. And then we'll probably have one more closure at the end of 2025, but then we'll be opening. So we're delighted, Dr. Hájková, that you joined us this morning. Thank you for this wonderful piece. And I have to say, this important piece, because it's an important piece of history. This story, especially because it kind of stands alone in some of these testimonies. So we are grateful for that. I want to wish everyone a happy Pride Month. And thank you for, supporting Holocaust Museum LA. We do have programming happening all summer off-site. We have a film series. We have book talks over at the Grove. So please join us. Go to our website, hmla.org. And Dr. Hajkova, have a wonderful day, and we will see you soon.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye-bye.